Welcome back in, everybody. It's another edition of the First and Orange Podcast Training Camp Edition. Parker Gabriel here, Luca Evans over there, your neighborhood Denver Post Broncos beat reporters. Luca, summer's over. We're in full swing of training camp already. Just dove right in, and I guess we'll just get right to it. Yesterday was sort of like that first day where you look around and go like, "Oh yeah, like we're in it."
Yeah, stuff's happening. I found myself being like after the Courtland Sutton stuff, and then Alex Singleton broke his thumb, and then, you know, five other different things were happening at camp, and I was like, all right, I guess this is my life for the next 6 months now, but that's what we signed up for. So
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think we're breaking too many rules here right off the bat, but there's a moment where we can say obviously in walkthrough, Dre Greenlaw just absolutely thumped Mike Burton, which is
yeah.
not really what you're supposed to do in walkthrough. But the funny part about it was there was a bunch of guys sort of like hooting and hollering after it. You know, defense always likes to set the tone early in camp. And the thing they kept yelling was "Welcome to the NFL," which is hilarious and ironic because Burton's like the oldest guy in the team. And I think actually has like the most NFL tenure of any player on the team. But yesterday also was sort of like maybe your true welcome to the NFL. Like, oh, here's four stories,
It
all
was.
simultaneously, and just like your normal camp coverage, first full day in pads. Dre Greenlaw speaking with us for the first time, in addition to Courtland Sutton and Alex Singleton, and an update to the update on Drew Sanders, and all this other. It's just when Sean Payton says all aboard the aircraft carrier for the next 6 months, this is sort of, I think, what the idea.
Yep.
Let's start with Courtland Sutton, obviously, because that's the biggest news of the day. You'd been right on this; had been percolating at least for a few days, and honestly, like it's been a story of the offseason. And it always felt like more like when rather than if with him. Although, like until it's done, you never really know. But they got the deal done, 4 years, $92 million. Under team control through 2029, 41 million in guarantees. What just sort of like give us a little bit of insight into sort of how this came together, and then also just where now Court can kind of like go from here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think last week at least, things were further from, a done deal. It seemed like, it wasn't that this was just going to happen at the drop of a hat, but, you started to kind of get a little bit of an inkling that something was up when obviously he wasn't, out there with the full team period, an 11 on. I think that was Friday or Saturday's practice, one of the two. But so at that point, things were clearly moving in a certain direction,
Right.
towards, yeah, exactly. Kind of the radar was alert on that one. And I think really, and I know we've talked about this and written about this previously, but I think that the kind of barometer for this, or the measuring point, was always going to be that Calvin Ridley deal, with Tennessee, in 2024 that he signed. Obviously, different circumstances. He comes in as a free agent. The market's different for that versus when you're just negotiating for an extension. But at the end of the day, he lands at 4 years, 92 million. Courtland Sutton lands at 4 years, 92 million. There's just a ton of parallels, both, 29 at the time that they signed their deal, coming off roughly the same, kind of exact same numbers, in terms of catches, yardage, the previous season. And so it makes sense. And it's also kind of, I think, a little bit of a tip in the Broncos' favor that they got that kind of deal done for, after a year of market inflation. They get it done before Terry McLaurin signs his deal, which would have inflated most likely, or would have been another bargaining chip for Courtland Sutton's agents, or Jacoby Myers, or any one of these guys. And at the end of the day, 23 million a year. I think I saw he's like the 18th highest paid guy in the league. I think that deal is going to look, Parker, you said this yesterday, I think this deal is going to look really good in about a month from now for the Broncos.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it's sort of one of the great things. You hear this from players a lot. Like I've talked to DJ Jones about this. It's like when you get far enough into your career, you know who you are, you're settled in who you are. It doesn't mean you're not like trying to get better or maintain as you hit your 30s or whatever. But like there was all this, like there was a lot of speculation about, oh, does Courtland Sutton want T. Higgins money or all of that? Like he just was never going to get to all the way to the top of the market. Like the very elite receivers in the NFL are up in that, like, I mean, T. Higgins is what, like 28, and then it goes up to, 35 plus with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And like Court's not that kind of player, but he's really good. And so landing sort of like below the elite tier and above the middle class, like it fits really well for him. And, that he gets guarantees, this year. We don't know all the details of the deal. We know the guarantee total. It looks like we know this year's, guaranteed probably in the form mostly of bonus. Next year's guaranteed. And then beyond that, we'll see. But like, that's sort of, for a 30-year-old receiver in the NFL, like that's what you're looking at. And that's, like you said, it's what Calvin Ridley basically got a year ago. So I think it makes sense for all sides. It doesn't look to me like, unless anything can happen, you get hurt, production falls off a cliff, whatever, like, sure, it could end up looking bad. But like, I mean, you watched Courtland Sutton the last few days, even not doing team stuff. One of the things that like no one will, debate with Court is he keeps himself in terrific shape. Like if there's someone going to play well, into his early toward mid 30s, like he's got a good shot to do that. Plus, like his game's built. He can run, but his game's built more on physicality and being where he's supposed to be and all of that than it is the true sort of like runaway speed that sometimes diminishes more quickly. So like I think it makes a lot of sense for the Broncos. It makes a lot of sense for Courtland. I would imagine if he would have played out this year, he could have got more than that in the open market. But playing out the year comes with its own risk in terms of injury, in terms of performance, and all of that. And so, like, yeah, one of those just like made too much sense to not get done. So now he's locked up. It's interesting. I was talking to Troy Franklin the day before, and Troy Franklin, he said that Courtland brings security to the room because it's sort of like when in doubt, just do what Court does. And that's like, that has real value too in a room where, of the guys who you think are going to play. I mean, the guy with the next most experience is Marvin Mims, and then who's going into his third year. And then you've got, Troy Franklin, Devon Vele, and Pat Bryant, the rookies. So, even if those guys, most of them are sort of like, you could say like, I mean, Devon Vele is 27. So, got some maturity to him and all of that. And Troy Franklin's come a long way, and what the rest of the group too. But like having the guy at the top of that room, to not just be a bridge player, but like a leader as those guys try to ascend in their careers, obviously is a big part of the equation here too. To say nothing of like Bo Nix, it being his guy.
It almost feels like a deal that's not necessarily just predicated on like, obviously last year kind of set a little bit of a new baseline for him, and it's possible that, he's a 1,000-yard guy again this year, certainly. But it almost feels like a deal that's not necessarily predicated on like, numbers and like production. Like, kind of like Bo Nix talks about Courtland, like just the consistency. Like, what you're going to get out of him, both from like, he's not really injury prone. He's, he's guys talk about him as a locker room leader, for the most part.
4 times in
exactly
8 years. And now, we don't know this for sure, but like good chance at 5, this summer.
He's like the unquestioned guy in the room. And to me, it feels like, you always have the debate with extensions. Like, oh, you look at the, the room behind him. And, we were talking about, oh, is Pat Bryant eventually going to position himself that, the Broncos don't need to extend Courtland Sutton, or is Devon Vele going to do that, or this or that? Like, to me, obviously, you may be getting to yourself where, you're paying too much for the wealth that you have. But I think to me, that doesn't even almost apply here, because like, he's just the guy in that room. Like you were saying, like everyone knows that, even if other guys start to assert themselves or establish themselves or this or that, or even like overtake him in production at a certain point, I think the deal just feels more like a nod to his standing in the
For sure.
overall evolution of this franchise, of this team, of where he is and kind of the culture of things. And so, from a greater philosophical perspective, I suppose, I
Right.
think that the money makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you could even, it's like you can let the ink dry before you start thinking about the too far in the future. But you could imagine a scenario where 2 years from now, like if this group stays together, stays healthy, plays together and all of that, like you could imagine a scenario where 2 years from now you're sort of weighing, being past most of the guaranteed money with Courtland Sutton, and then that young core, Marvin Mims will come up before that, but like those
Yeah.
guys of Vele, Franklin, and Pat Bryant, like moving toward whether you're going to give them second contracts or not. And so like you have this sort of like, basically what you did was like you pushed all the decisions that you have to make with this receiving core out up to 2 years if they all play well. Obviously, like there's a lot that goes into that in the NFL and injuries happen and all that, but like you sort of everything the Broncos have done. And this is one thing I think George Payton and Rich Hurtado, the cap guy, and the front office in general, Sean too, one of the things that they deserve credit for is as they've gone through and taken care of players over the last, let's say 18 months, you can not only see why they extended the players that they've extended, but you can sort of see on the back end of it, like the planning that goes into
Right.
understanding, just sort of where you're projecting that player to be when they come toward the end of the deal or toward the end of the guaranteed money. So that's all a little bit in the weeds. Obviously now, like it's never too early to start thinking about what happens if you're talking about a big contract with Bo Nix in a couple of years. Like all of that plays into length, guarantees, structure, even though Nix has only played 1 year. So it's an interesting deal. I think it works for both sides. And I'd imagine we're recording this Tuesday morning. It probably
Yep.
will not be up until Tuesday after practice, but I would imagine that on Tuesday, I can foresee the future that we will talk to a very happy Courtland Sutton after practice today.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Do you anticipate that? I don't think we know for sure, but I'm assuming the majority of that guarantee, the 27 million of new money, is going to be, kind of front loaded on the first couple of years of that extension or this or that. To your
Yeah, for
point.
sure. Because he
Yeah.
was carrying such a big cap number this year, non-guaranteed money. I mean, the 13.5 would have become guaranteed because he's a veteran, like when the season starts. But yeah, he's carrying a huge cap number. So you can move a lot of the bonus to the first year.
Yeah.
And not, they have cap room to be flexible anyways, but like you can move a lot of the bonus up and then prorate it, but you can stack a lot of it and still his cap number will drop from 20 million for sure for this year. So you're going to front load it and then you're going to roll more money over from this year to next year anyways. And so like this was a deal that like if you weren't planning on just letting him walk,
Yep.
is a deal that needed to happen too, because it's good for your cap this year, which means it's good for your cap in the future.
Yeah, and to finish our thinking on this, to your point, like if you're pushing these decisions back a couple of years, yes, there's a ton of bodies in this room and a ton of young guys, but like Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims are kind of, a little bit overlapping in terms
Sure.
of their skill sets, what they're doing. Pat Bryant, yes, maybe he's eventually kind of a hair to the throne as an outside guy, but he's also, he's a guy that you can move kind of all over the formation. He can play in the slot. He can do a lot of different things. He's not, exactly one-to-one skill set with Cord. And same with Devon Vele, is kind of more of a slot guy or this or that. So there's not one guy in the room that you kind of point to and say, oh, this guy is coming up in a year. Why would you pay Courtland Sutton? Because this guy can do the exact same thing maybe in 2 years that he's going to do. Like, I don't think that exact guy exists on this roster. So,
Yeah, not only that, but Bo Nix threw him the ball 135 times last year,
exactly. And you
and not
need
only that,
that. We haven't
like,
even talked about Bo and
yeah,
all this really, but he's like, yeah, that's,
he's the second happiest guy besides
yeah.
after Court. He's number two, and that's like over the last 10 games last year, Courtland averaged almost 10 targets a game. So like
Yeah.
that became, as Bo Nix made progress over his rookie year, it was in part because he had sort of like full and unwavering trust in Courtland. And like in attempting to build around Bo, it would seem completely like counterintuitive to like take sort of like even if like Bo Nix if he's more balanced, which he was pretty balanced last year, Evan Ingram's going to get targets this fall. The running backs might get more targets this fall. All this can be true. And it still makes no sense whatsoever to like consider messing with the one thing he was most comfortable with last year.
I saw your analysis. Go read Parker's analysis on this, by the way. But I think you said he had, obviously not being here last year, he had what, like 20 catches for 270 or something through week 7
games. Yeah.
It
was it was one of those things where they, you know, they beat New Orleans and it was a blowout. So it was a rare night game where you can actually like, this is inside baseball among journalists, but like, you know, like it was one of the rare night games where you could actually, I actually like sat there for the fourth quarter and wrote rather than just like going by the seat of your pants, which was great because it had the feel, it was such a big game for Sean Payton going back and all of that. And so like I'm actually like sitting there like writing a story rather than just like reacting blindly and hoping that it makes some semblance of sense on a night game deadline. And so it wasn't until like probably even after the locker room, after Sean talked, that you actually sit there and go, okay, yeah, blowout win, whatever, you know, Sean's the story. And then I was looking at the thing, I was like, man, Court didn't get a single target. Not only did he not catch the ball, but he didn't get a target. Only time in his entire career. He tore his ACL on the first play of a game and still got a target in that game. So like it was the only time in his career he's never been targeted. He was having the success rate was low, like 22 catches on 47 targets, like well below 50%. Like it just was sort of a slog for him. I don't think he'd had more than 68 yards in a game that was in Tampa. And a lot of that was just attributable to Bo being off to sort of a slow start throwing the ball. He was coming along, but it was like, okay, he's starting to take off. You're feeling good. You're 4-3. And the guy that felt like he was sort of getting left behind in the whole equation was Court. And so like to not only not bitch about that, but also then to go on the run that he went on after that, like to me, that was the thing that solidified him as like, all right, this guy's worth keeping around.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, it's a great point. That's a crazy run.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
All right, so more things happened at camp.
A lot more.
Alex Singleton broke his thumb. He's only going to be out about a week, but we know that Drew Sanders is going to be out, 6 to 8, probably 4 to 6, up to 8. So inside linebacker, problem or not problem?
I mean, you're talking about like a week of camp. I think they just need a guy to kind of step up and solidify them. They need one guy from the room to step up. I think that is all signs most likely pointing towards Lavelle Bailey as that guy, especially like he's going to get so many reps now across this next week. All that he can handle. I think Justin Strnad is, he proved last year he's a capable fill-in piece, but I think like Lavelle Bailey has just been, like the ball has been places and Lavelle Bailey has been there next to it throughout the entirety of camp and off-season activities. And so I think, if he shows across this next week that, he's a guy that they can capably rely on for depth, because again, you're not going to count on Alex Singleton and Dre Greenlaw being healthy for a combined 34 games this year. So, and then Drew Sanders already, we didn't really know what in the heck he was going to be. So you need a guy there. And then, you have the stable of undrafted rookies, Karenny Reed, J.B. Brown, Jordan Turner. And so, I think they've all looked pretty decent in camp, made a couple plays. So maybe a guy steps up there. To me, I don't think, especially at this point, in camp and this or that, I don't think you need another body there, especially as you kind of go through these next few days. But I think it'll really I think Lavelle Bailey is going to be kind of a key pivot piece the next few days. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Strnad hadn't played a defensive snap in 3 years, I think, until he got thrown in last year when Singleton got hurt, and he played pretty well. Now, the Singleton being out and Cody Barton, who did not re-sign, and Strnad playing a lot inside is part of what made the Broncos feel like they had to go out and get help there. So like
Yep.
he can't, I don't think he can be necessarily like your lead guy, but you've got not only Singleton, who we think is going to be out about a week and then back at practice, probably with the club for a while, but also Dre Greenlaw. And so if he's playing alongside one of those guys, you feel better about it too. So like, to me, I wouldn't be surprised if they work some guys out, maybe sign somebody, something like that. Like
Yep.
for the short term, Sean Payton said that to your question yesterday. It's
Yep.
more of a depth issue in the short term, but like overall, I think they're in a fine place. But they just have sort of like moved to that point where it's like one more, and you could be in a world of hurt, which like that's not a great place to be on July 29th. So like, is it a nothing burger? No, it's not. But like for right now, I think they're still pretty solid there.
Yeah, it's also like, who are you? I mean, at this point, who are you going to cut to bring in, a camp body realistically for, a week or two or however long you feel comfortable with Drew Sanders' injury. So, yeah, we'll see on that. I thought, just to touch briefly on Dre Greenlaw, but I thought really interesting guy just from the brief few minutes that we saw from him at the podium. Sean Payton said he played like Mike Tyson. I think he looks like Mike Tyson. First off, the dude he's built. And I think it's interesting because we have not seen, like, we saw a glimpse of it when he, like you said, nearly took Mike Burton's head off. But we haven't seen the full, like, sideline to sideline Dre Greenlaw unleashed. He had a moment yesterday where, like, after a few plays in 7-on-7, he was kind of huffing and puffing, and coach was kind of cracking on him like, this is
altitude.
Yeah, altitude. And so I think there's still, like, this entire process. He obviously was rehabbing the quad throughout off-season activities. This whole month is going to be a ramp up for him. But I'm going to be really interested to see, like, what he looks like at the end of camp, or even going into the San Francisco game like a week from now. So yeah,
definitely. Outside of the positions we've touched on before we go, what's your most interesting takeaway of camp so far, or what's one thing that's sort of like been on your mind?
There's a lot of things that have been on my mind, Parker.
We could just do this podcast all day and just not go to practice, probably.
Yeah, probably. I think. Well, I think we came into camp thinking the secondary and the running back rooms were going to be the most interesting. And I think that's certainly played out so far. I mean, your story on obviously the kind of nickel battle that might be forming between Jahdae Barron and Jaquan McMillan. But obviously there's so many different formations and things that, Vance Joseph can play with, like Riley Moss, for example. Like I was even talking to Marvin Mims, and he was saying, like, Riley is doing things that he wasn't doing last year. He can do things now and so you have guys like that, and obviously Pat, and I think that's going to be really fascinating to watch, because they've thrown out. You can never, like, you couldn't come to a single day of camp and see what they're doing in terms of trotting out the ones or this, that, and go, oh, this is their starting.
100%.
Like they're literally rotating stuff every single day. I think the running back room is shaping up a little bit more.
Yeah, clearly.
Like it's pretty clear. You have J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey is the two guys, and then from there you've got this kind of mess of touches split between Julian McLaughlin and Audric Estime and Tyler Bidet and Blake Watson, and then I think from there, like. I think you can obviously probably take away that Jaleel is going to, crack the roster because he's just such a trusty guy. But you can kind of point to I wouldn't be surprised if they took anyone from that room and cut anyone beyond, their two top guys. So that's going to be interesting to me for sure. And I think, I really think Audric Estime needs to have a massive next couple of weeks to stick on this 53 man. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where preseason games are just like, they're so critical.
Vital.
for young players. I think to me, like I had questions, not like overwhelming questions, not even necessarily doubts, but questions, and they're open still about the depth behind the top two guys at outside linebacker. Like we saw Jonah
Yeah.
Ellis play well, we saw Dondre Tillman play well, and like Tillman had 5 sacks in the NFL last year, so there's some known quantity there. But sacks are a little bit fluky. He didn't play a ton. He could have easily had 3 or whatever, and so
Right.
like. But both of those guys have looked good. Ellis, is cleared after he had the shoulder injury in the playoff game, but maybe still kind of like getting all the way up to full speed. But like Tillman has juice,
He's hooping
and Jonah Ellis has juice, and Q Robinson has juice,
big time.
and so we're just one day of pads. We'll see another one today, and then obviously for the rest of the week, and then next week you get some of those guys can go against Trent Williams or whatever in San Francisco, and we'll see. But like that's a group that between Cooper and Benito, and then the 3 guys that have after, like that's one that like if it goes the way it looks like it's going, or it has the potential to go, that room could just like really be outstanding, both in terms of quality and depth. So to me, like. I'm not ready to sit here and say right now that that's what's going to happen for sure. But the way the puzzle pieces have sort of like, they're not all fit together yet, but the way they're sort of like moving toward the rectangle,
flowing around. Yeah. They've just made life hell, like on the offensive line for the entirety of, and when I wrote just, something simple last week on how good they look and Jonathan Cooper and this or that, like going through the room, not a single guy except maybe Jonathan Cooper has peaked. Like you can realistically, like they all have tremendous upside beyond what they've shown already. Like everyone, Nick Benito had 13.5 sacks last year. Every single person, including Nick Benito himself, will point to him and go, there's more, there's plenty more that we can get out of you, whether it be this or that. Same with Dondre Tillman, same with Jonah Ellis, same with Q Robinson, same with, there's like, they're already this, and they could be like each individual guy in that room could take a step up. And I think that's really scary.
Yep. No doubt. We're going to leave it there. We got to get to practice.
Yeah.
We'll be back. We'll have some video stuff too on YouTube over the course of training camp. We'll be back either later this week or early next week. For more training camp coverage. Check out everything we do, denverpost.com/Broncos. That's Luca. I'm Parker. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.